Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up as an Irish maid in the 1800s? No? So welcome to the 3% Podcast. This is Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I'm here with Tom Roberge from New Directions. And this week we're going to talk about a few things. I guess one thing we should do first is say that that Bolaños by Night in Chile won the World Cup of Literature, since we talked about like the Final Four, I think, last time.
Damn straight.
And so there you go. that was pretty much after he got past Sebald, it didn't really matter. I think Sebald and Elena Ferrante were the real competition. Yeah.
I mean, the internal emails, I don't remember how many of them you put up in the final post, but between all of us, debating between the Mexican novel and the Chilean Bolaño was like, yes, that novel is good and she's an up-and-coming writer, but, this is Bolaño. This is a masterpiece, You got to give it to the masterpiece, so.
Yeah.
Who knows, if we did this again in 4 years or whatever, perhaps that book would still qualify and Bolaño wouldn't, and, it might get another chance. So.
I think if we do it in the future, we should only have living people.
I kind of agree with you. It's a little weird to have people like Bolaño. I mean, he did just recently die, but even like Sebald felt a little wrong,
David Foster Wallace a little bit too. I mean, there's a lot of dead people in here.
Yeah, even though it was... Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of novels written at the end of people's lives, basically.
Right.
That's when people tend to do their best work, but it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So I say next time living people.
Anyway, so that was that. That was a lot of work on your part and my part.
It was. I think I sent this to all of you guys, but in Uruguay they had a whole article about how Bolaño won.
Yes, and there was another paper, the El País.
It was the El País in Uruguay, though.
Oh, okay, got it.
Or it's the Uruguayan edition, I guess, or whatever. But because I thought it was in Spain too, but then it had all the information for Uruguay's weather on that webpage. So I'm thinking it was actually Uruguayan, but regardless, it's pretty awesome that some newspaper in the world took the time to dedicate a few inches to that thing that we did.
See, it was all worth it.
Yep, exactly. Oh, man.
And now, I mean, while we're on the subject here of World Cup and perhaps not sports, but my interest in soccer is completely evaporated.
This is when I get more ramped up. I love the club levels, because you're not confined by country anymore.
Yeah, well,
teams can make teams. Then the teams play better generally because they're together for longer periods of time and are solving certain problems that they might have,
right,
rather than having to do it just internally. But
right.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun this year again. I think I'm interested to go see this Manchester United Real Madrid game. Should be fun. I've never watched a preseason game. I've never seen a teams of that magnitude ever, but a preseason game like that is going to be pretty interesting because it's in the big house, so there's 120,000 people there.
You think they'll sell out?
It already did. It sold out in 24 hours.
Jesus Christ!
Yeah, my dad couldn't get 2 tickets together, so you could only get 2, and they had to be apart. So then he called the morning that they went on sale because he was part of their whatever special privileged people.
Got it.
Because he works with all those people. So yeah, they'll be pretty crazy, but we shall see.
Right. So we wanted to talk about it's almost August. It is relatively quiet in the literary world.
Mm-hmm.
People tend not to publish big important books at this time, so the discussions tend not to be about those books. But on the other hand, we've got Tim Parks writing for the New York Review of Books blog. I don't think this was in print.
No, it's just on the blog, yeah.
Talking about Knausgaard and the whatever you want to call it, phenomenon, fervor. And it's called Raise Your Hand If You Read Knausgaard. And it's basically about how, despite all the hype and, the sort of subtle marketing that it's an international bestseller and whatnot, that it's really not selling very many copies. And part of it has to do with publishers just generally not being very straightforward about numbers, and they don't have to be. I mean, really. And, how these things just sort of get morphed and whatever. And, he tries to compare it to, was it Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code, or Echo's The Name of the Rose, or things like that. Things that were like genuinely hits that, everyone was reading and sold, millions of copies. And of course, this is not that.
Here's a weird contradiction in that thing too. This is like a really bad article.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you first emailed me, like, we should talk about this, and I had already read it, and there was some Twitter talk about it. And I have these 3 tweets, and you were like, and I told you that, people had issues with it. And so Edward Champion, he writes, Savage Detective sold 22,000 in hardcover, according to Publishers Weekly, which undercuts Tim Parks' Knausgaard piece. Now, I don't know how it specifically undercuts it, but is Ed trying to make the point that 22,000 is a lot?
No, I think that doesn't he? No, maybe not. I was gonna say I thought he mentioned Bolaño in here somewhere as like someone who genuinely
sold a lot.
Yeah, but now I don't see that. I might be making that up.
Well, he's talking about Savage Detectives. It sold in paperback about 80,000 in the first year. So altogether, in the first 3 years of Savage Detectives being published, it sold about 100,000 copies, which, for a book that size, translated by a dead author, that's not bad at all. I mean,
I think 22,000 is not bad at all.
Oh, no, of course not. But it's also FSG. I mean, it isn't Archipelago. So
right.
22,000 for them is, good but not great. For Archipelago, it's amazing. 22,000. Yeah. I mean, that's fantastic. They're thrilled, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Whatever. So there was that comment, and then I don't know if you saw our friend Michael Orthofer actually wrote a piece on his blog, The Complete Review, which he takes issue with some of the, he nitpicks, to be quite honest, about, some fact checking and spelling, which, come on, people, get your act together. They misspelled Stieg Larsson's name.
Yeah.
And
Jostein Gardner.
Jostein Gardner and somebody else. And there were these other things, like, just not checking when things were published in the UK and, that kind of thing. Which...
That one, I misspell everything, but the thing that he was referencing was that one line in this article says, a search on the Guardian website has 10 pages of hits for articles on Knausgaard, despite the fact that the first volume of My Struggle wasn't published in the UK until 2012. Initially, that just said, despite the fact that his work hadn't been published until 2012, but it had been in the Big Angel book, which some of those articles that Tim Parks is pointing to were about. Yeah. Which that's a pretty dumb mistake to make.
Exactly. Which apparently they did fix, although they never apologized or acknowledged.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Anyway, I mean, people seemed to react to this piece it's like a big so what, okay, so people are saying it's an international bestseller, but it's not like people are saying millions of copies sold on the cover. It doesn't say that. And no one is claiming that it does. And Parks' argument seems to be that, there's a bit of a fraud in the way we're talking about this book. I don't think that's true.
I don't either. I think there's like a few problems with his argument and article in here. One, that I love that any article, like you guys must get these too, of the submissions that always open with a rhetorical question. like, have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up as an Irish maid in the 1800s? And all your answer can ever be is like, no. And like Tim Parks opens this essay with, is there any consistent relationship between a book's quality and its sales? Or again, between the press and critics' response to a work and its sales? Are these relationships stable over time or do they change? And I just want to say no. Done reading your article because I hate your rhetorical questions at the very beginning. But one of the things that's funny is he references in here too that that people are imagining that My Struggle is one of those books that periodically impose themselves as required reading on a global level, like Echo's Name of the Rose, Sophie's World, Smilla's Sense of Snow, Jonathan Franzen's Freedom, which springs to mind. But then on the next page, he talks about, in the next couple of paragraphs later, he talks about how Freedom didn't do as well as the Corrections and only sold 68,000 copies in hardback, rather fewer in paperback, and half of what the Corrections sold. So his argument's like weirdly, he defeats himself in the middle there. But then, like, he does seem to say like that somehow like that we've taken bestsellerdom to be equal to cultural value of a book, which is super stupid and wrong. Like, these books are it doesn't matter how many copies they've sold in America and the UK. They have like a impact on the way people are talking about literature and about autobiography and things like that. There's more to books that they can have a larger cultural reach or larger impact on culture, even if they don't sell a million copies. Like, it seems weird that he's conflating those two things. But then he like there's also like there's little problems throughout here. Like, there's the one section I thought you'd get really pissed about, which I'm just gonna read. As early as 1950, the Italian novelist and critic Cesare Pavese was worrying about the blurring of lines between the trivial and the serious, complaining that commercial was being presented as literary and literary made as commercial as possible. Indeed, that literariness itself was becoming a genre. Literary prizes, he believed, were not immune. Eager for winners to reach a wide readership and bring the prize more attention, juries would be encouraged to choose popular winners, and writers would begin to write towards this mix of popularity and easy prestige, which I thought would irritate you because it smacks of like the elitism that they usually react to.
Yes. Well, no, that does bother me. It also bothers me what he's talking about in the two sentences before that, where he says literary authors like Graham Greene and Muriel Spark in the UK or Updike and Roth in the US were achieving very considerable sales in their own countries, and genre authors like Le Carre or Isaac Asimov were justly noted for their literary qualities. And it's like, it seems to he's talking about this distinction between, high literature and popular literature or genre literature mattered in the way they were perceived by the public, and because of that, how the sales would be. That literary stuff would not sell is basically what he's trying to say.
Right.
But it got, this distinction broke down, and good stuff was selling millions of copies. And I can't tell if he was complaining or like heralding these people or what, or is that a knock on Graham Greene and Muriel Spark? It's really hard to tell, but to me that's a good thing, right? Like, people should be reading Le Carre. He's the smartest spy novelist there is, just because you like genre stuff doesn't mean you can't like the best genre stuff, Like, you don't just like all the bad genre stuff. It's weird to think that, people act as one massive unit, and that everyone who reads spy novels is going to only like one type or only the lowest common denominator. It's the same thing as assuming because I like literary fiction, I'm going to like Jonathan Franzen,
Right.
It's just bullshit. It doesn't work that way. We all have our own tastes and we all gravitate towards what we like, and I assume the average reader reads all over the place these days. It's not just literary stuff or translated stuff or noir or whatever.
Yeah, that's one of the other problems that I had with this is where he talks about like the newspapers having their own bookshops and blah blah blah, and they review both J.K. Rowling and Orhan Pamuk with equal solemnity, attention being driven by the sense that the writer is winning prizes or moving copies, being pushed as a book of the season by a major publisher, not as a lucid curiosity for whatever may be written between the covers. But I feel like newspapers, like all the criticisms I have of like the literary world of reviewing whatever else, which some still hold. But with this, I think that like newspapers or magazines or whatever are geared towards particular readers. So like if a newspaper is going to review 10 different books, they can review J.K. Rowling for the people that maybe that's a terrible example, but J.K. Rowling for the people who really like J.K. Rowling, and that is a group of their readers, and then on the next page, and treat that seriously for those people, because those people like those books and engage with them, and on the next page review Crash and Horkai in a serious way for the people who like Crash and Horkai. Like, I don't understand why there's a problem with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is he likes to view himself as a champion of a sort of thing, and that he wants other reviewers also to do the same thing, and he doesn't like it when they take on sort of popular stuff, because it's largely viewed as like, why bother reviewing J.K. Rowling when everyone's going to buy it anyway? You know, like there's no point in reviewing it, because a bad review is not going to hurt sales, and you're not going to dissuade anyone, and a good review is not going to make it sell any more copies, right? And so he wants reviewers and the editors who publish the reviews to, as he says, go out on a limb to praise it, and push things, and that is the only conversation that should be held in public. Well, I disagree. I mean, to me, part of the publicity does two things. It gets attention for books, which is what all publishers want. But it also this is our public conversation outside of academic circles for these works of art. And those conversations need to be had. And if Harry Potter is so transcendently popular, it's defining, 15 years of the literary world, then yes, it needs to be talked about. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, or you think it's lowbrow or whatever, it's something that is in our culture and it should be talked about.
Yeah, I also, with that part that you referenced, he has a bit about the fact that critics will feel anxious these days if the book has not been rewarded by at least decent sales. And I don't feel like that's the case. Esposito took that up as like a complaint. And I don't know how many critics are like, I'm going to really like this book, and if it doesn't sell well, I'm going to be anxious about it.
Well, no, it's they want to believe that their stamp of approval carries a lot of weight. It's an ego thing, right?
Yeah, that an ego thing, yeah. But I don't know how many of them are like, oh my god, I reviewed whatever my struggle, and now I'm going to keep checking the Nielsen book scans to make sure that it's justified.
Yeah, I don't know who actually does that. I mean,
that seems like
imagine like James Wood cares one bit whether how many copies were sold after he talks about a particular writer. I mean,
and there's nothing. There should be books that sell 20,000 copies, and that's fine.
Yeah,
not everything needs to be one way or the other. This is a digression, but I don't know that I've ever talked about this. But I think that you might even find this interesting. So he references the Harry Potter problem of translating the character names or whatever. My friend here that teaches at SUNY Brockport teaches French, and uses in his advanced French class the French translation of Harry Potter, because it's like the only way that the kids are engaged with learning the language, because they've all read Harry Potter, a billion times or seen the movies or whatever. So having to read it in French, they actually get to understand like how the language of French works, because they know things about it and know how it had to be changed or had to be translated into French. And it's actually pretty interesting, some of the things that he's talked about with that too. Just digression.
That's kind of sad, I gotta say.
I think it's kind of awesome, because it would open up a lot of like options. If you're reading that, then you get to talk about like tenses more easily. You have a lot more examples that are like that people would be able to engage with, rather than like the textbook examples of like whatever saying like, I had to go to the market last Thursday. Like, who cares? But if you use it within the context of the book that they're reading, it's a little bit more interesting.
I'm not arguing that, but why not use French literature?
I think for freshmen and sophomores, I think that he does with some things, but I think with that one, I think it's pretty useful for that level.
Weird.
Well, and also because no one will fucking read French literature.
Oh, come on, Kevin. That's what I first read.
No, my intern is looking dismayed by that. But Jesus Christ, no, I work with these students. Come on, man. Like, I will unfortunately break everyone's heart and say that like 90% of them, maybe Camus because it's short, maybe they'll read that, and that's fairly straightforward. But like, I don't know. I think a lot of them would rather skip over anything like that, anything that would require that kind of commitment.
That's really sad.
That's fucking the world, though. Unfortunately, you know. Speaking of Knausgaard too, did you see the thing on Melba House where they wrote up about this guy, this blogger who like debunked the whole idea that there are these my struggle free days at Norwegian workplaces that had become like a thing. You've heard this story before, right? That like
I heard the story. I don't think I ever believed it in the first place, but
that people, yeah, that the basically for anyone who hadn't, that workplaces would say like you can't talk about my struggle on Fridays, whatever, because everyone was consumed by talking about these books, which yeah sounds like total bullshit. But apparently someone went through and this blogger was obsessed with trying to figure out what the origin of the story and never really found it and basically assumed the whole thing is crap.
yeah. Well, I mean, if the internet has taught us anything, it's that most stuff is not real. Every feel-good story, every cute photo, there's like some ulterior motive that proves it was not the spur of the moment or feel-good thing you wanted it to be.
No. So people in Norway are allowed to talk about it whenever they want.
And I'm sure that not every Norwegian citizen is obsessed with this book and to the point that they are, slacking off at their job and only discussing, Knausgaard at the water cooler or whatever. No, that just doesn't happen. Sorry.
That doesn't even happen like with Harry Potter.
No, exactly. And
people are talking about like
really,
Big Brother or something.
It's really quaint to imagine that literally everyone in Norway is reading these books. I somehow don't think that's true.
No, the closest you can get is like the Super Bowl. Like everyone will talk about the Super Bowl.
Right. But yeah, even the World Cup, like there were definitely people who had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
The world's most famous thing, and yeah.
So going off of student comments, one of the things I think I may have talked about this to you or at least on here before, but every semester for my literary publishing class, we talk about online book discovery tools for like 1 week essentially, or like one class or 1 week, depending on how far into it we get. And we go through and use like Small Demons and Goodreads and BookLamp, which is the one I want to talk about, and Book Likes, and which are some of the others. There's usually like 6 or 7 that I can pull up that are different created algorithms so that you can like type in like an author that you like or different qualities that you like and find other authors or other books that you might like based on similar things. And I always start with BookLamp, which was acquired by Apple, which is why I'm talking about this, because BookLamp is the fucking worst of these sites I have ever encountered in my life. And it embodies so much of what's terrible about this kind of thought process that I just have to share it. Have you ever looked at this thing? You can't look at it now because it's down, which is super disappointing. BookLamp is just awful. Okay, so there's an article on Publishing Perspective, though, that has a bit about it. Now, the reason I always start with it is because they claim that they are creating the Book Genome Project, just like Pandora has the Music Genome Project, to determine like which types of music that you like, what elements of music that you like, therefore you will like similar sorts of music and it'll play it for you, right? So the BookLamp's concept with their Book Genome Project was to break down books into particular groups of the story DNA, and then based on the story DNA, be able to recommend to you other books that have similar DNA, right? Okay, so this already sounds like a terrible idea, right?
Well, wait, can I ask, what is story DNA?
Okay, so The Girl Who Played with Fire, it'll have language, first of all, and the language will have these different categories, and it'll have a rating of, like, say, it just has a bar, but it looks like it's like 0 to 100 or whatever, right? So language, motion, density, pacing, dialogue, and description. And each of the little bars, so there's a lot of motion, not a lot of density, not a lot of description, pretty high on pacing and middle of the road for dialogue. And then the story DNA contains things like police involvement, police presence, scheduling, elements of time, criminal investigation, newspaper reporting, features of the body, pistols, rifles, and weapons. And the one, and then it has each one of those has a bar, and then based on that, it'll recommend something to you. And the one that I always use as the example is Sound and the Fury, which is just like shooting a fish in a barrel, right? Because like, there's no way that this stupid fucking algorithm is going to be able to figure out what you'd want to read after Sound and the Fury based on like the elements of that story. But nevertheless, when you look up, so when you used to be able to use this, and you could look up Sound and the Fury, the number one, there were two story DNA elements that were top of the charts. One was family history, and the other was novels about vehicles. And so it would recommend a bunch of books based on like Southern. It was like young adult. It recommended like 4 books, and they would be like young adult family stories about kids that go on car trips.
Okay.
It was the worst. And so Apple paid $30 million for this.
No, that's not right. Is
That
it?
is absolutely right. $30 million for the Pandora for books, so that they can have some algorithm that breaks down books into into these categories of things, and then somehow is going to recommend to you other books through Apple's awful bookstore. This whole thing makes me a little nauseous because I've made fun of this forever because it's so perfect for like explaining how books don't work that way. That's not of interest. This is why algorithmic thinking can be flawed. Like, what are they trying to do? How are they breaking it down? Why is it? How does it compare with like Last FM or like a social element of reading? All these things are like perfect for like exploring like discussions of book stuff, especially in an online environment. But now $30 million for that? Oh my God. It's sort of discouraging.
I don't even know where to begin. The first thing I thought of when you said story DNA, I was thinking of the widely thrown out there assertion that there are only 7 basic plots.
Oh, right.
Revenge, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And that they're all in Hamlet. Basically.
Right.
Which, that you cannot suss any of that out by just a unemotional, a non-human analysis of this text, right?
Right.
Like you were talking about the Sound and Fury, there's no way you can convey to someone what Faulkner does or what his books are about by just reading the words on the page. That's what literature is, right? That
Yeah.
you apply your own experiences, knowledge of the world to the words that are on the page, and your own experience plays into it so that you can envision what the author is talking about, right? On the easy end of the spectrum are, very, Dan Brown, whatever. And then on the other end, it's like Philip K. Dick, who just creates worlds and just says, you know what, here's where you are now. This is what's going on. Take 10 pages and get used to it, and then we're just off on the story, and that's where it goes.
Right.
But the point is, like, there's still humans, and there's still human elements, but none of it makes any sense as just words. You know what I mean? Robots can't read. They're not going to understand what's going on. It's absurd to think that there's an algorithm that could ever figure this out. It works for music because there are schools of music, right? You can
I think
trace
it only
things.
works so well for music, to be honest, too.
It doesn't work perfectly, but
Yeah.
it's there's a way in which it makes sense.
Yeah.
Right? You can say, like, you could put a label on something like punk rock or post-punk, and it opens up this web of musicians. And then if you throw in, like, add electronic, it gives you, like these Venn diagrams of things that make sense, right? And you might not like all of the results, and it may not make total sense to you as you listen to one of these channels. But, from a musical school, a lineage of music, it makes sense, Like, every time I put on the Bob Dylan channel, I'm irritated that Bruce Springsteen shows up. And it's like, I don't like Bruce Springsteen. I've never liked Bruce Springsteen. But I get why people who like Bob Dylan like Bruce Springsteen.
Uh-huh.
It doesn't mean you all do, but it makes sense. They're storytellers. It's basic sort of rock and roll without, bells and whistles for the most part. That,
Right.
it addresses, very normal human things. It's not the Flaming Lips. You know what I mean?
Right.
Even though, like, musically, if you took the Flaming Lips background music and Bob Dylan, probably wouldn't sound all that different, like just breaking it all down. But when you add the music and you add the lyrics and the other stuff, it changes it totally.
Right.
Anyway, I can see how it works for music. This makes no sense. Also, can we just address the fact how many Apple has like a 4% share of the digital book market or something absurd? Like, they just don't sell books.
According to this, yeah, no shit. According to this article, they have bought 29 companies since the start of the year, not including its $3 billion purchase of Beats. Which I wish were Beats, like just the vegetable. $3 billion for the Beats for everyone in Apple, because Beats are goddamn delicious. But they also bought this other thing recently called Swell, which is supposed to be sort of the Pandora for talk radio. I don't know what Swell is, so I'm just gonna ignore that one. But it's called Swell, which sounds pretty terrible.
Pandora for talk radio.
That's literally what it says in this article.
So is this like if you like the sound of Ira Glass's voice, they find someone with a similar tone of voice, or they find something similar subject matter wise?
You know what would be awesome is if it was subject matter. It was like, you've heard Coast to Coast, right? From back in the So like if you like Coast to Coast, it would find other Coast to Coast like talk radio for you to listen to, like very high on conspiracy theory, wacky callers, like random alien sightings. I would listen to that.
Like the guy who claims to have shot Bigfoot?
Yeah, those people. Okay. I love that shit. That's the best thing about talk radio to me, are those people calling in. I love them. I love those shows. I think that they're super fun. But yeah, I don't know what the hell. It's disturbing, to say the least. It's very disturbing.
Yeah, I use the iTunes or whatever iPhone podcast app,
right?
And you listen to I listen to one on Slate called The Gist, which is a daily news thing. It's only a half hour long. It comes out in the afternoon. You listen to it on the way home from work, whatever. The recommendations based on that are just like, what the fuck? Like, just because I listen to this doesn't mean I want to listen to Slate's movie podcast. Doesn't mean I want to listen to anything, that has to do with, war, like BBC or something like that. It's just like, it's a very specific sort of way of doing the news. That does not mean I like all news. It's just not that easy. You can't just say, hey, listen to New York Times. Like,
right.
It's more complicated and subtle than that. And I get why people do this. I get why it's a thing. We all, Amazon does it better than anybody, unfortunately. And, I'm glad that it works for us. I'm sure you guys get sales this way too. Is somebody goes on. I'm sure if you go to the Knausgaard books, our books are going to pop up in there, right? Just because they're translated, they're from these countries where people tend not to read a lot of literature. But meaning we don't read a lot of translated from the Norwegian kind of stuff. And so if there are other Norwegian books, from us or from you, they're going to pop up there, and that's a good thing. And they're very serious and literary, and they're reviewed by the same sorts of places, and it makes sense.
Yeah.
Do I think it's perfect? By no means. You can go to like a Bolaño book, and it'll recommend Isabel Allende, and he despised Isabel Allende.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're totally different styles, and I can't imagine there's a lot of overlap. And if you love Bolaño, chances are you don't love Isabel Allende. But I get why it's there. It's it's not insane.
No,
if you were rattling off the qualities of these books. This is the metadata of a book, right?
Right, essentially. And like how you determine metadata. Like the Netflix thing was is the kind of the premiere, and like the story that was in Wired magazine about that I'm pretty sure we've talked about before, where like they had the contest to improve their algorithm. Right. And like then all the things that go along with that are really interesting to me conceptually, in the sense that like the one guy that was working on it was talking about how you rate things very highly. You overrate things after you've seen a bunch of crappy movies, and then will underrate things after you see a lot of great movies, because you're usually doing things in comparison, not like this is always a 4. Like the things happen to you at different points in time that cause you to rate things differently, and that recommendations based on that have to take into account kind of the behavior of the viewer, not just like the qualities within those movies. And I think that that's really fascinating. I think none of them do this perfectly. The thing that's weird to me is like how much, I mean, it's not weird, it's just like staggering how much money is going into that concept. And I mean, it's not just with books or with music or anything like that. I mean, everything about I was looking at Wired Magazine this morning because they will never cancel my subscription. I have not paid for Wired Magazine in like 6 years. It will never stop coming. It comes every month. It's shit. It's pretty annoying, to be honest. I almost brought it in for a rant, but I want to stick with my original one. But it's just pretty bad. But I was looking through there, and they had a thing about 3 new startups that were getting all this money. And one of them, I think it was like $200 million of startup funding to help. It's like a algorithmic based app that will help you determine the things that you usually do in order. So like rather than like if you wake up in the morning, you're like, I need to go start coffee. This app will tell you that you need to go start your coffee when you wake up in the morning because that's what you usually do. Like this sort of like
usually do it.
I don't know why this is important, but $200 million is a lot of money to be going into like that kind of like routine making heuristic sort of thing. It's just I don't like it. I just don't like it at all. And the more that I read about it, the more it just like makes me uncomfortable. And this BookLamp thing sort of broke me because it was like, Apple, you could have bought. And there are others. There are many others, and you bought the one that was like pretty much the shittiest. For a lot of money. That guy's suddenly very wealthy.
Do you think maybe it's just they're going to improve on it? Or
I think they're going to take whatever the background... Obviously, they're not going to use... If you could have seen BookLamp's website, it was awful. Like, the design was like the worst design ever. It's just a terrible... I'm sure I could go into the Internet Archive and pull this up and screen cap it for everyone. But it was bad. And I know that they're not using anything like that. They're just going to take the technology, and the technology may well just consist of whatever they were using to scan in books, to use scanned in or ebooks, and break it down into different components. That might be all they wanted, but they still paid that much money.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. I can't understand. I mean, they have a lot of money to throw away. I mean, they paid how much for Beats Audio, which is
$3 billion.
So absurd.
Super absurd. I would like $1 million to go into Open Letters coffers for whatever.
Yeah.
1 million would make me happy. 30 million's insane. So you wanna rant about something?
No, I get to rave.
Oh, you get to rave. I meant rave, yeah.
Yeah.
Like rant in a positive way.
You're gonna rant in a positive
No, I'm saying you could rant in a positive way.
No, I'm not gonna rant about anything. And well, all right, there's a built-in rant, but it's not my rant.
Okay.
So Emily Gould's book, Friendship, came out about 2 weeks ago and has been getting reviewed. And Emily, who's very active on Twitter, I just want to praise the way she has been dealing with some of the review blurbs that these people... One of them is from the New York Times, and it says, Emily Gould's Friendship is, quote, as frothy and fleet a story as one could hope to find. Now, I have some issues with that quote right there. I do not think that any review in the New York Times would call a man's book frothy and fleet. It's just kind of patronizing, and a way that they talk about women's books, and it's unfortunate. Emily, to her credit, wrote back, replied directly to the New York Times and said, I think you have mistaken my book for a small cappuccino. And I appreciate like her just taking them to task and just not doing it in a very obnoxious way, just, pointing out how silly it is to use such a sentence like that in a review. Then another one, and the second one I noticed was I was like, oh my God, this is sort of a trend. She's doing this well. She quotes a review by Full Stop, which, whatever. And it says, this story itself, told by a woman about women, is in some ways refreshing. So that's from the review. And then she writes, LOL, thank you for the pat on the head, sir. And again, like she's addressing the fact that they're treating her like a good little girl or something like that. And it's obnoxious to do that. But she's responding in this very direct, like very directly to them, but in a way that's not, she's not trying to start a war. She's not ranting for 2,000 words. It's screaming and making all of this noise about how her book is being reviewed. But she is addressing these people, and I hope that the editors who allowed these sentences in there will take note, and the next time they review a book by a young woman that deals with women's relationships, will think twice about it. And this is a good way to address these kind of things, I think.
Okay. I'm not going to comment on Emily Gould or on her book.
No, I'm not either. I think
refrain.
Whatever you want to say about her book itself, and whether or not we'd be fans of it is one thing. To acknowledge that she's addressing her critics in a very good, smart way, I think worthwhile.
That is really cool.
So you get to rant.
I get to rant, but I think you'll appreciate my rant because it's partially about where you've been here in Rochester. So, I've been riding my bike a lot, and like generally most nights, like I even went on a 176-mile bike ride. But on most nights, I've been doing is going out and going on like a long roundabout, like 20-mile bike ride, and then going to a coffee shop to read, mostly to work on whatever it is like that I have to read for work or edit or something, right? And the thing that's been disturbing to me that I want to rant about is the number of pretentious fuck coffee places that we have in this town now. One of which you went to when you were here for Alta a couple of years ago. We went to Joe Bean, where we tried to have breakfast, I think, and all we could get was the prosciutto plate and the cheese, and their coffee took like 25 minutes to make because they had to brew it specially through their Chemex blender thing, which I've owned for years, and it's fine. And I understand that people like coffee. I like coffee a lot. I drink a lot of coffee. I probably drink more coffee than any human being that I am aware of drinks coffee. But I do not need to go into another one of these stupid places that generally have one-word noun titles like poor, is one of the new ones here, to pay like $5 for them to take 20 minutes to brew me a coffee that's somehow so much better than any coffee that I could get anywhere else, in their terrible environment that's filled with people who are like the worst sort of hipsters. I feel like this new pretentious coffee has taken all the bad parts of going to cafes in the late to middle 90s, and mixed it with all the bad parts of like craft brewing and craft distilling things, and all like the wannaphile people and their wine, and made it into a shitty thing that they're applying to coffee, which I don't want. I want to go to a coffee shop to drink coffee and to be able to do the things I want and not have to talk about which one of the brews I want and which single origin blend. Like, fuck those people. It is all like a pretentious presentation, and it drives me crazy. That's my rant.
Yeah, no, I look, I live in Brooklyn in a relatively, I won't want to say upscale, but, there are a lot of hipsters and, people with money around here. And, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 that I could walk to within 5 minutes. And they're all of varying degrees of pretentiousness. And, I get to say, I get Americanos, so it's the easiest thing to make, and I have no complaints and whatever, and it's very quick, right? But when you're stuck in line behind somebody who's ordering one of these complicated things and they want to talk about the beans and all that, you're just like, oh my God.
I can't take it.
I understand this is your social interaction for the day with this barista, and you want to talk about the trip you took to Guatemala, but I don't care at all.
Yep.
I don't know if you get this, but I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. So my girlfriend has Monday and Tuesday off, and so that means that, we generally, before I do any work on Monday or whatever, we'll go have coffee in the morning, say 9 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, which is when most of the world is working. And even in New York, we don't have, there's 9 to 5 people, but there's also a ton of people who work from home and are freelancers and all that sort of thing. So you go to a coffee shop and you walk in and every table is occupied by one person working on a laptop. And which is hard. I mean, we just want to go in and sit there and, talk. And we are the ones who don't fit in because, it's hard for us to find a place to sit and whatever. Anyway, I wonder if all the people who open these coffee shops appreciate, like, did they get into business? Did they do it because they wanted to give people with laptops a place to work? Like, I can't imagine that, right?
No, that sounds terrible.
Been to Europe or Seattle or something where people do just sit down and drink coffee and talk to each other. And that's what they envisioned, having this nice community place and blah, blah, blah. And instead they've got single occupied tables where people just work and don't talk to each other and buy one. It's just, it seems like a really sad business to own.
Absolutely.
I don't know. I feel bad for coffee shop owners for that reason.
I agree with that. There is one here that I have not gone to because it and you'll understand why in a second. But it's called Fuego, and basically it's set up as a coffee bar. So there's no way that you can sit and work there. You have to sit at a bar and drink your coffee, and it's dark, and then you leave. So you set it up. They've set it up so that it's like you go in and you have your coffee and you interact, and then you leave. Like there's no way you can work there. You can't do that. And part of it is to discourage those people.
I have no problem with that. You know what?
I don't either. I haven't been there because I always go to read, and I don't want to go talk to people. I don't really care. They're most likely they're not that interesting, unfortunately. But I understand the sentiment, and at some point in time, I will go there when it's the right moment.
I like in Europe how they have these like tiny little coffee shops in like small towns in like southern France or Italy or Spain, where you walk in, there's a copper counter, there's an espresso machine, there are no chairs, and you go in, you order your espresso, you drink it, and you leave.
Yeah, those are great.
Stand at the counter, and it's the best coffee you're going to get, and there's no one sitting there, and that's the way to do it.
I also should point out, I never sit inside. I always sit outside unless it's raining. You got to sit out somewhere to be outside.
It's hard around here.
Yeah.
Habit.
Yeah.
Outdoor spaces, a prized commodity in Brooklyn, that's for sure.
But we have a pro for Emily Gould's response to people's patronizing reviews and a anti-pretentious coffee.
Yes. Yes.
This is a good rant and rave session for once.
Yeah, I mean, no books in there.
No.
Culture of any kinds, really. But,
coffee is culture.
I'll have some, when I do some reading on vacation, we can talk about books again.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Well, you have fun in Joshua Tree.
I will. I will give you a report on the Integratron, it's called. It's a art installation that is a giant hanger-sized thing that's a sound bath, quote unquote.
Oh, cool.
So everyone I've talked to has told me I need to go to this.
It looks pretty awesome.
Don't really know what to make of it. I'm not sure I'm going to like it, but
yeah. It looks like, there's one picture. The picture that looks awesome when you type it in is the one with all the the lightning around it. It looks like some fucking Tesla thing. The rest of the pictures make it look way more normal, but the one with the lightning looks awesome.
Ooh, yeah. I don't know.
I don't think that's part of it usually.
So is this? I mean, no one listening understands what we're looking at. But would you consider this a geodesic dome?
Yes and no. It's a dome, but I think the geodesic dome is specifically the one with the... I took a picture of one on my bike ride, actually, to Niagara Falls. There's a geodesic dome that I passed. I think it has to have the specific... those, not squares, but the
six-sided?
The six-sided, yeah. The thing, the way that it comes together. Because that was part of his... Buckminster Fuller's vision for it, was that it was super cheap, and you could ship those things to like any location, put it together. I don't think you could put this together that way.
No, it's definitely a dome. It looks like a mosque, sort of.
It does sort of look like a mosque.
Like the Dome of the Rock. It's funny if you... So if you... Other images, sound bath, giant rock. Giant rock.
Yeah, I like that. It is a giant rock, too.
It's a very large rock.
Who is George Van Tassel that built it?
No idea. I'm sure I'll have a full report for him.
If you go to his images, it's giant rock and UFO.
Oh, yeah, this makes sense. The other thing everyone asks me about going to Joshua Tree is how much peyote am I going to do? So,
hopefully a lot. I mean, you should just do a shitload of that and record all of our podcasts.
Apparently all you do is hallucinogenic drugs out there, which...
Seems about right.
Seems about right. My days doing that are over.
Okay, well, you have fun up there, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Happy reading, whatever you read.
Yeah, I'm finishing those the 1977, but then I have to finish working on. No, actually, I just finished our last new book that's coming out next spring. So I've finished reading all of those. So I'm taking a little bit of a break. But I probably should be reading people's manuscripts that might be listening to this podcast that they've sent me that I've been ignoring.
But which you will diligently read and assess with, your full attention.
Yeah, I do want to read some of them, but like after reading a bunch of manuscripts, I don't know if you have the same feeling, but after reading a bunch of manuscripts, even if it's like editing them or whatever, I want to read a book that's like a fully bound book. I don't want to read any more pages, any more of like the loose leaf pages. It just doesn't feel right anymore. I need a break from it.
Right. Not only that, but you want to read something that's complete without an eye to editing and copy editing and improving and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, I want to read The Symmetry Teacher. I think that might be the next thing that I read that's like a translation by Andrei Bitov. That looks pretty interesting to me, but we'll see. Anyways, you have fun with your pulp books.
And I will.
And we'll talk soon.
All right. Bye.